The concept of the Antichrist has woven itself into the fabric of human history, a figure that embodies the ultimate opposition to Christ and the values associated with him. Its origins can be traced through a complex interplay of religious texts, historical events, and cultural interpretations that have evolved over centuries, shaping the way humanity understands good and evil. The term Antichrist first appears in the New Testament, specifically in the epistles of John, where it describes a spirit of denial against Christ and his teachings. The early Christians faced persecution, and in this context, the Antichrist became a symbol of the oppressive powers that sought to extinguish their faith. The figure was not merely a single individual, but represented a collective embodiment of opposition to the teachings of Jesus, manifesting through various rulers and empires that threatened the nascent Christian community. Historically, the Roman Empire loomed large as a significant antagonist in the eyes of early Christians. The Emperor Nero, notorious for his brutal persecution of Christians, was often viewed as an archetype of the Antichrist. His reign was marked by tyranny and cruelty, and the Great Fire of Rome in 64 AD, for which he scapegoated Christians, further solidified this perception. The early Christians, in their writings and oral traditions, began to characterize Nero as a precursor to the Antichrist, a tyrant whose actions were seen as a direct affront to the teachings of Christ. As Christianity spread, so did the interpretations of the Antichrist. The Book of Revelation, attributed to John of Patmos, introduced more vivid imagery associated with this figure. The beast from the sea, often interpreted as the Antichrist, was described as a powerful entity that would rise during the end times, leading many astray. This apocalyptic vision resonated deeply with communities facing persecution, and the figure of the Antichrist became a rallying cry against the injustices they experienced. The symbolic nature of the Antichrist allowed believers to contextualize their struggles within a larger cosmic battle between good and evil. Cultural interpretations of the Antichrist have evolved significantly through history. During the Middle Ages, the figure became entwined with the political landscape of Europe. The rise of the papacy and the church's wielding of power led some to view the Pope as a potential Antichrist, especially during the Protestant Reformation. Reformers like Martin Luther and John Calvin accused the Catholic Church of corruption and straying from true Christian teachings, suggesting that the institution itself was an embodiment of the Antichrist. This theological conflict fueled a broader cultural discourse regarding authority, faith, and the nature of evil. As the Enlightenment emerged, the Antichrist took on new dimensions. Rationalism and skepticism towards religious dogma prompted thinkers to reinterpret the concept. The Antichrist was no longer solely a religious figure, but began to symbolize the broader threats posed by secularism and materialism. In this context, the Antichrist became a metaphor for the loss of spiritual values in a rapidly modernizing world. Literature of the time reflected this shift, with authors exploring themes of moral decay and the struggle between faith and reason. The 19th and 20th centuries saw the Antichrist evolve further, influenced by both global conflicts and the rise of new ideologies. The horrors of the world wars and the rise of totalitarian regimes led many to identify contemporary leaders as embodiments of the Antichrist. Figures like Adolf Hitler and Joseph Stalin were often depicted in apocalyptic terms, their actions viewed as manifestations of an ultimate evil. This period marked a significant shift, as the Antichrist was no longer confined to religious texts, but became a lens through which to understand political and social turmoil. In popular culture, the Antichrist has been depicted in various forms, from literature to film. Works like the Omen and Left Behind series have contributed to a modern understanding of the figure, often emphasizing themes of prophecy and the battle between good and evil. These narratives resonate with audiences, tapping into deep-seated fears about the future and the potential for a malevolent force to rise against humanity. The Antichrist, in these interpretations, is not just a distant figure, but a reflection of contemporary anxieties about power, corruption, and moral decay. The cultural significance of the Antichrist continues to evolve, particularly in the context of globalization and the digital age. The internet has facilitated the spread of conspiracy theories and apocalyptic beliefs, leading some to suggest that the Antichrist could emerge in a new form, perhaps as a charismatic leader or a technological entity. The blending of religious fervor with modern anxieties creates a fertile ground for interpretations of the Antichrist that resonate with a global audience. Despite the myriad interpretations, the Antichrist remains a potent symbol of the struggle against evil. It serves as a reminder of the human capacity for both good and malevolence, a duality that exists within every individual and society. The historical, cultural, and religious contexts that have shaped the understanding of the Antichrist reveal a complex tapestry of human experience, reflecting our fears, hopes, and the eternal quest for meaning in a world fraught with uncertainty. In essence, the origins of the Antichrist are deeply rooted in the human experience, an exploration of power, faith, and the moral dilemmas that arise in the face of adversity. As societies continue to grapple with the concepts of good and evil, the Antichrist endures as a compelling figure, a reflection of our darkest fears and a challenge to our highest ideals. It is a narrative that transcends time, urging humanity to confront the forces that seek to undermine the values we hold dear. The story of the Antichrist is ultimately a story about us, our struggles, and our relentless pursuit of truth in a world that often feels chaotic and uncertain. The impact of his arrival and his prophesied end. The arrival of the Antichrist will mark one of the most terrifying and chaotic periods in human history. According to biblical prophecy, he will rise as a charismatic and powerful leader, deceiving nations with promises of peace and unity. However, beneath this facade of diplomacy lies a dark and malevolent agenda orchestrated by Satan himself. The Antichrist's rise to power. The Antichrist's ascent will be gradual yet strategic. According to Daniel 9:27, he will establish a 7-year covenant, bringing temporary peace, especially to the Middle East. This treaty will likely include Israel, as it is said he will allow the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem, a pivotal event in end times prophecy. However, at the midpoint of these 7 years, he will break the covenant and commit the abomination of desolation, Daniel 9:27, Matthew 24-15, desecrating the temple and declaring himself as God. This event will trigger the Great Tribulation, a time of unprecedented suffering and oppression, the reign of terror and global control. Once in full power, the Antichrist will establish a totalitarian global system, enforcing economic and political control through the infamous Mark of the Beast, Revelation 13:16-17. No one will be able to buy or sell without this mark, effectively enslaving humanity under his rule. His reign will also be characterized by intense persecution of Christians and Jews, as described in Revelation 13:7, where he will wage war against the saints and attempt to eradicate all opposition. He will perform great signs and wonders, deceiving many into believing he is the true savior of the world. The final war, Armageddon. Despite his overwhelming influence, his power will not last forever. As his rule nears its end, the world will plunge into total war. The Battle of Armageddon, Revelation 16:16. Nations will rise against him, but at this moment, Jesus Christ himself will return in glory. Revelation 19:11-16 describes Christ's second coming, where he will arrive as the King of Kings, leading the armies of heaven. The Antichrist and his forces will be utterly defeated in a supernatural battle, where the mere breath of Christ will destroy him. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2-8. The prophesied end of the Antichrist. The Bible explicitly states that the Antichrist and the false prophet will be cast alive into the lake of fire. Revelation 19:20. This marks the absolute defeat of evil's greatest earthly ruler and the beginning of Christ's millennial reign. Conclusion. A false victory turned to eternal defeat, though the Antichrist will rise to unprecedented power, deceiving many and ruling the world with an iron grip. His end is already determined. His false kingdom will crumble before the true King of Kings, and his name will be erased from history, forever condemned to eternal judgment. For believers, his arrival serves as a warning, but also as a reminder that no matter how great the darkness, light will prevail.